Can you believe there's actually a diet out there that promotes the reduction of healthy fats? This is literally the worst diet that I've seen in 2023. Absolutely dismal. It's called the Ornish diet. Have you heard about it? What it recommends is not just low fat. I mean, I'm sure there's plenty of people out there that recommend a low fat diet, and that's not the end of the world. But they're recommending a low fat vegetarian diet. We can discuss all kinds of things, and I can get upset when you say, hey, like you should reduce your protein intake or reduce your meat intake, and that can irk me a little bit, but you have your right to your opinion. And on the other hand, you can say, hey, like I'm gonna reduce my nut intake, I'm gonna reduce my olive oil intake, my avocado intake. I might have some opinions, but that's fine. Like if that's the way you wanna go. But when you start combining both of those and you become that hyper restrictive, forget any potential agendas here. Like forget anything like that, whether it's a potential, low fat agenda or low protein or whatever. Like, no, I'm not even as worried about that as I am about how restrictive can we possibly get? Like what's next? The butter lettuce diet? Is that pretty much where we're heading? And this isn't like a diet that is just like making its rounds in different magazines and tabloids. No, this is like being touted as a truly beneficial, revolutionary type diet, the Ornish diet. So restrict all of your meat intake, no more meat intake. You can have the occasional eggs, but you should really be going for egg whites. You can have the occasional dairy, but it should be low-fat dairy. You want to know how much fat they recommend? They recommend less than 10% of your calories from fat. That is unreal. Like if you ate a 2,000 calorie diet, that's 20 grams of fat. Like that's a small handful of almonds. That's your fat for the day. And you better be zero fat the rest of the day. That means that like even a ribbon of fat that is on something you'd have to get rid of. You're not having meat, so I guess there's no fat there. Your salads, heaven forbid you put olive oil on those, you'd overshoot that goal in a minute. Now, it's interesting because the biggest piece that frustrates me with this is that we're overlooking some of the most robust research in the world of monounsaturated fatty acids and even polyunsaturated fatty acids. And I know people are not always fans of polyunsaturated fatty acids like seed oils and things like that. I get that. But let's leave monounsaturated fats out of this argument because they are so important, right? Olive oil, avocados, avocado oil, macadamia nuts, macadamia nut oil. These are arguably some of the healthiest fats. And when you look at like extra virgin olive oil, you see so much literature in support of lipid profiles, in support of cardiovascular disease, all of these things. And if you look at the immune response and inflammation, this becomes even more important. There was a study that was published in Scientific Reports, and it took a look at human monocytes, like immune cells. And what they did is they induced inflammation via lipopolysaccharides, so basically inflammation kind of stemming from the gut. And they found that monounsaturated fats reduced, actually blocked, the inflammatory response with interleukin-1 beta, tumor necrosis factor alpha, interleukin-6, massively reducing the inflammation. Well, why does this matter? Well, we have more than just an obesity problem. We have more than just a metabolic health problem in this world. We have an inflammation issue. Now, they all go hand in hand. So we're talking about recommending a diet that reduces one of the essential things for the modulation of inflammation. I'm going to talk about another diet too that's really popular that I can almost guarantee you've heard of before. We're going to talk about why this one's problematic too, because I want to look on kind of an opposite scale too. Because like this one is hyper restrictive with so many guidelines it's almost paralyzing. And then the other diet is much less restrictive, but it gives us context as to why putting these blinders on and putting these bumpers can sometimes be problematic. Now, when you are doing any kind of diet, nutritional density is the most important thing. I encourage you to not look at dieting as dieting. I encourage you to not look at foods as good or bad, okay? I encourage you to look at food as nutritionally dense or nutritionally sparse. Does that Snickers bar have a lot of nutrient density? Not energy density. I don't care about the calories. I did a video a while back on calorie dilution versus calorie restriction. Calorie dilution, eating as much as you want with a lot of foods that keep you full. And ultimately, you could eat ad libitum in that fashion and lose more weight and have more success than if you restricted calories. Calories matter, but it's much more beyond that. I put a link down below for a sponsor on this channel for Thrive Market. By the way, that's a 30% off your entire grocery order link. So they have fresh options now. That's why I mentioned this, because a lot of people didn't use Thrive Market before because it didn't make sense because it was only pantry staples and frozen stuff. Well, now you can get your fresh groceries there too. So that means your fruits, your vegetables, your cottage cheese, all of that delivered to your doorstep. 30% off your entire first grocery order. Plus you get a free $60 gift when you use that link. So definitely recommend you check them out. Not to mention, I just launched my keto nut butters with them. So chocolate hazelnut, plus cinnamon Brazil nut, and macadamia nut dessert butter sweetened with allulose. So again, macadamia nuts, super monounsaturated fat rich. They won't work on the Ornish diet, that's for sure, but they'll work in just about every other nutrient dense diet. Thrive Market is about nutrient density. That is really one of their goals, at least as far as I'm concerned. So use that special link down below and help support them to support us in doing what we do. What's wild is even the most aggressive organizations that are anti-fat still recommend things like the Mediterranean diet, or they recommend diets that are 20 to 30% fat. That's reasonable. No one's asking you to do keto. No one's asking you to go super high fat. But why on earth would we restrict fats? You know what would start happening? Hormonal function would decline, myelination would decline, insulin would kind of take who knows, right? Like sometimes these fats, like monounsaturated fats, help modulate insulin, help modulate glucose tolerance in certain ways. So all kinds of things would go cattywampus. It's a huge problem. And now I want to talk about the other diet, good old Weight Watchers. You know the issue I have with Weight Watchers? Weight Watchers is on a point system, so it gives you this illusion of flexibility, an illusion that you can eat whatever you want as long as you are keeping it within this score. And that is great for liberating the mind. But when it comes down to the nutrient density, it leaves a lot to be desired because it's focused much more on energy density. So like you look at even fruits and stuff like that, like they're a low score, but it's not a score like a rating, like this is an A+ food. It's like, hey, you can eat as much of this as you want. Well, I wouldn't recommend eating 500 or 600 grams of carbohydrates from kiwis and pineapple and having no protein because it doesn't score where you want it to score. So you start developing biases and you start developing interests based on the scoring system. So you have so much abundance, in a weird way, you're restricted because you have abundance in different categories that doesn't necessarily line up with what your body needs. What has not been created is a profile that actually looks at nutrient density. Instead, there's always an agenda behind it, always a eat more of this and less of that agenda, or it's just frustrating and it's exhausting. Because at the end of the day, we should look at what the body needs to function as far as basic nutrition, and we should craft something on that. And you should eat as much as you can of good, wholesome food, because it's very hard to overeat that way. And then you have periods of restriction. So eat a lot of good, wholesome food. Eat a lot of good, wholesome protein. Eat a lot of good, wholesome seafood and meat. Eat a lot of veggies. Eat a lot of fruit. And move a lot. And then occasionally restrict aggressively, maybe with some fasting or with calorically restricted days, so that you get this balance and you get this ebb and flow. You don't need to follow the Ornish diet and have 1,000,001 reasons to be tethered to a certain thing. As always, keep it locked in here on my channel. See you tomorrow.